If you've ever sat quietly while your own family laughed at you, if you've ever been labeled the poor one, the failure, the least successful, then this story isn't just mine. It's yours. Because the night my parents mocked me in front of everyone, smiling, joking, comparing me to my sister, I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I smiled. And that smile scared me more than their laughter ever did. Because I already knew something they didn't. But before I tell you how inviting them to my house changed everything, let me tell you who I am. My name is Alyssa Morgan. And for most of my life, my parents treated me like the mistake they never planned for. Before we go any further, if you connect with real-life family stories about humiliation, silent strength, and quiet revenge, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Now, let me take you back to where it all started. I grew up in a house where love came with conditions. My parents weren't abusive in the way people imagine. No shouting every day, no broken furniture. It was quieter than that. Sharper. The kind of pain that hides behind jokes, comparisons, and constant disappointment. I was the younger daughter. My sister, Melissa, was everything they wanted. Straight A student. Perfect smile. Married young to a man with money. From the moment she succeeded, I became the contrast. Why can't you be more like your sister? She knows how to plan her life. At least Melissa chose stability. Those words were part of daily conversation in our house. Not shouted, said casually like facts. I tried. God knows I tried. I worked 2 jobs through college. I skipped vacations. I wore old clothes until the seams gave up. While Melissa posted pictures of vacations and new furniture, I was learning how to survive. But survival doesn't impress parents who only measure success by appearances. The moment everything truly broke was at a family dinner. It was my mother's birthday. Melissa arrived late, as usual, wearing designer clothes and complaining about traffic. Her husband handed my parents an expensive gift, and my father's face lit up like Christmas morning. Then they looked at me. I had brought flowers. Simple, thoughtful, affordable. My mother smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. During dinner, the conversation shifted, as it always did, toward houses. Melissa had just moved into a bigger one. 5 bedrooms. A pool. A kitchen bigger than my entire apartment. My father laughed and said, "Some people know how to build a future." Then he looked straight at me. "And some people," he paused, smiling, "are happy just getting by." Everyone laughed, including my mother. Melissa didn't stop them. She just sipped her wine. Then my mother added the sentence that would live in my head for years. "Alyssa, you'll never have a house like your sister's. And that's okay. Not everyone is meant for big things." I felt my chest tighten. My face burned. But I didn't respond. Because when you've been the family disappointment long enough, you learn that defending yourself only gives them more to laugh about. That night, I went home to my tiny apartment, sat on the floor, and stared at the wall until sunrise. Something changed in me. Not anger, not tears. Resolve. I stopped talking about my plans. Stopped explaining myself. Stopped asking for approval I was never going to get. I worked. Relentlessly. I took certifications at night. Saved every extra dollar. Lived smaller than anyone thought possible. I didn't tell my parents when I changed jobs. I didn't mention promotions. I let them believe I was still struggling. Because for the first time, their underestimation became my advantage. Years passed. Family gatherings stayed the same. Same jokes. Same comparisons. Same laughter. They loved reminding me where I stood. "You still renting? Must be hard watching your sister live so comfortably. You should have married smarter." I smiled every time, because by then, I had already signed papers they knew nothing about. But the real moment, the one that made this story what it is, came when my parents decided to host a reunion. They wanted everyone together. And my mother said something that made my hands shake when I hung up the phone. "We'll do it at Melissa's house," she said. "You wouldn't have space anyway." I took a breath. And for the first time, I spoke up. "No, I said calmly. Let's do it at my place. There was silence. Then laughter. My father laughed so hard I had to pull the phone away. At your place, he said. Alyssa, don't embarrass yourself. My mother added. You don't have a house for something like this. I smiled. I do, I said. And you're all invited. They thought I was lying. They thought I meant my apartment. They had no idea what was waiting for them. And that invitation was the beginning of the end of every joke they'd ever made about me. When I hung up the phone, my hands were shaking. Not because I was scared, but because I had finally crossed a line I'd never crossed before. For the first time in my life, I hadn't backed down. For years, my parents had spoken to me like I was temporary. Like my life was something unfinished, unstable, and unimpressive. And I had let them. I had learned to survive by staying quiet. But that invitation, that single sentence, let's do it at my place, changed everything. The next morning, my phone started buzzing. It was my aunt first. Alyssa, she said gently, in that fake concerned tone people use when they think you're about to embarrass yourself, your mother said you want to host the family reunion? Yes, I replied calmly. There was a pause. Then a soft laugh. Oh, honey, you don't have to prove anything. We can all just go to Melissa's. It's easier. Easier. That word followed me my whole life. Easier to praise my sister. Easier to ignore me. Easier to pretend I didn't exist unless I was being compared. I'm not proving anything, I said. I just want everyone together. Another pause. Well, all right then, she said, clearly unconvinced. By noon, the messages turned sharper. Cousins texting emojis. Uncles making jokes. Someone even asked if they should bring folding chairs just in case. I read every message. I didn't respond to most of them, because explaining myself had never worked before. And I wasn't about to start now. That evening, my parents called. Both of them. On speaker. That alone told me this wasn't going to be pleasant. Alyssa, my father began, his voice already irritated. What exactly are you trying to do? I'm hosting a family gathering, I replied evenly. My mother jumped in. Why? You know your sister's place is better suited. Bigger. Nicer. More appropriate. Appropriate. As if I had to earn the right to invite my own family somewhere. I have enough space, I said. My father scoffed. Enough space for what? 6 people? Alyssa, don't make this difficult. That word again. Difficult. That's what I always was to them. Not Melissa. Never Melissa. She knows her place, my father once said about her. And I knew exactly what that meant. I'm not making anything difficult, I said quietly. I'm just offering. My mother sighed dramatically. We don't want you feeling embarrassed when people see. See what? I interrupted. Silence. They had no answer that wouldn't expose them. My father cleared his throat. Just think about it. You don't need to do this. I already have, I said. And I hung up. My heart was racing, but something inside me felt steady. I looked around my living room. Sunlight streamed through wide windows. Hardwood floors gleamed softly. The space was quiet, peaceful, and entirely mine. This wasn't luck. This wasn't inheritance. This was years of sacrifice. Every late night, every skipped meal, every time I swallowed my pride instead of defending myself. I walked through the house slowly, touching the walls, the kitchen counter, the staircase railing. They didn't know. They had never asked. Because they never believed there was anything worth knowing. The day before the gathering, Melissa called. She never called unless she needed something, or wanted to remind me where I stood. So, she said lightly, Mom told me you're hosting. Yes. She laughed. That's ambitious. There it was. Not cruel. Not direct. Just enough to remind me of my position. You know, she continued, people might feel uncomfortable. My place is more established. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. They'll be fine, I said. Well, she replied, clearly irritated now, don't expect everyone to stay long. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply said, see you tomorrow. and hung up. That night, I barely slept. Not from fear, from anticipation. Memories played in my head like a loop. Every time I'd been ignored at family dinners. Every birthday overshadowed by Melissa's milestones. Every joke about my job, my car, my apartment. "You'll catch up one day," they'd say. But what they never understood was this. I wasn't trying to catch up. I was building something entirely different. The morning of the gathering, I woke up early. I cooked. I cleaned. I arranged flowers on the dining table. Not to impress them, but because this house deserved to be treated with respect. As I set plates out, my phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. "Will come. But please don't make this awkward." I stared at the screen. Awkward. As if I had created the years of discomfort. As if I was the one who laughed. As if I was the one who compared. I didn't reply. An hour later, the first car pulled into the driveway. Then another. Then another. I watched from the window. Faces curious. Voices confused. People stepped out slowly, looking around. And that's when I knew. They hadn't expected this. Not the neighborhood. Not the driveway. Not the house standing quietly, confidently in front of them. I opened the door as my parents arrived. My father stopped mid-step. My mother's smile froze. Melissa's eyes widened, just for a second, before she masked it. "This is," my mother began. "My house," I said calmly. And in that moment I felt something shift. Not triumph. Not revenge. Something deeper. The beginning of truth. The moment they stepped inside, I could feel it. That shift. The kind of silence that doesn't come from politeness. It comes from disbelief. My mother was the first to enter. She paused just beyond the doorway, her hand still on her purse strap, eyes moving slowly across the room. The high ceilings. The open staircase. The wide living area flooded with natural light. She didn't say anything. She didn't smile either. She just stood there. My father followed, his confident stride slowing with every step. He looked around like he was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. Melissa came in last. She said nothing. That alone told me everything. For years, she had filled every room she entered with her presence. Her success announced itself before she did. But here in my house, she shrank. Not physically. Emotionally. No one laughed. No one joked. The cousins who had teased me stepped inside quietly, glancing at each other. An uncle let out a low whistle before catching himself. Someone muttered, "Wow," under their breath. I closed the door behind them, and suddenly, they were all standing in a space they had never imagined belonged to me. "Make yourselves comfortable," I said evenly. "You can leave your coats there." They moved slowly, carefully, like people afraid to touch something that might disappear. My mother walked toward the living room windows. "This is bright," she said, her voice strained. "Yes," I replied. "I like natural light." She nodded, as if filing that information away for later. My father wandered toward the kitchen. He opened a cabinet, closed it, ran a hand over the countertop. "How long have you lived here?" he asked. 8 months, I said. 8 months. I watched his jaw tighten. "You never mentioned it," he said. "You never asked," I replied. That landed harder than any argument ever could. Melissa finally spoke. "This place must have cost a fortune." I met her eyes. It was an investment. She smiled, tight, forced. "Must be nice." I recognized that tone. It was the same one she used when she pretended to be happy for me in the past. But now there was something underneath it. Unease. We moved toward the dining area. The table was already set. Simple. Elegant. Nothing flashy. "Dinner will be ready soon," I said. My mother pulled out a chair and sat down slowly. "You've done well," she said. "Not I'm proud of you. Not I underestimated you. Just you've done well." As if my success was something accidental. I nodded. "I worked hard." My father cleared his throat. "So, what exactly do you do now?" That question. The one they never asked before because they assumed the answer wouldn't matter. "I manage a regional operations team," I said. "I started my own consultancy last year." Silence. Consultancy? My uncle asked. Yes. My father frowned. And that pays for all this? I smiled faintly. It does. Melissa shifted in her seat. Funny. You never said anything. I didn't think anyone was interested. I replied calmly. That stung. I could tell. Because it was true. They had never cared enough to ask. As dinner was served, the conversation stayed awkward. Forced. Everyone's suddenly careful with their words. No jokes. No comparisons. No laughter at my expense. Instead, they watched me. How I moved. How I spoke. How confident I looked. It unsettled them. My mother leaned over at one point and whispered, You could have told us. I looked at her. Would it have changed anything? She didn't answer. Halfway through the meal, my father tried to reclaim control. So, he said loudly, Melissa's thinking of upgrading again. Bigger place. Better neighborhood. There it was. The comparison. The old script. Everyone looked at me, waiting. I took a sip of water. That's great, I said simply. Good for her. No defensiveness. No bitterness. Just calm. It threw him off. Well, he continued, clearly annoyed now, some people like to keep moving up. I met his gaze. Some people like to build quietly. The table went still. My mother stared at her plate. Melissa's fork paused midair. My father leaned back, lips pressed tight. That was the first crack. Later, as people wandered around the house, I overheard whispers. I had no idea. She never said anything. This doesn't make sense. That last one made me smile. Because it didn't make sense to them. They had built an image of me that suited their narrative. And now it was collapsing. My aunt cornered me near the staircase. Why didn't you tell anyone, Alyssa? I shrugged. I didn't feel the need. She hesitated. Your parents, they really thought. I know what they thought, I said gently. She nodded slowly. I'm sorry. That was the first apology I'd ever received from anyone in my family. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. I excused myself and went upstairs for a moment. I stood in my bedroom, looking out over the backyard, listening to the muffled sounds of my family downstairs. I felt strange, not triumphant, not angry, just aware. Aware of how small they had tried to keep me. Aware of how wrong they'd been. When I came back down, Melissa was standing alone in the kitchen. She looked at me, arms crossed. You could have warned me. About what? I asked. That you were doing this well. I raised an eyebrow. Why? So, I wouldn't look stupid, she snapped. There it was. Not I'm happy for you. Not I'm proud. Just concern for herself. I never tried to make you look stupid, I said quietly. I just lived my life. She scoffed. You always had to prove something. I shook my head. No. I stopped proving things a long time ago. She didn't reply. Because she couldn't. As the evening wound down, people began to leave. One by one, they hugged me, complimented the house, said things like, you should be proud, and we didn't know. My parents stayed behind. My father stood near the door, hands in his pockets. This was unexpected, he said. Yes, I replied. My mother looked at me, her eyes searching. Why invite us? After everything? I met her gaze. Because I wanted you to see me, I said. Not who you thought I was. She swallowed. They left shortly after. I closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. My phone buzzed. A message from Melissa. We need to talk. I stared at the screen. Because I knew, truly knew, that this wasn't over. The house reveal was only the beginning. And the real confrontation was still coming. The silence after they left was heavier than I expected. Not peaceful. Not relieving. Heavy. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, staring at the closed door, listening to the echo of footsteps that were already gone. For years, I had imagined what it would feel like when my parents finally saw me, really saw me. I thought there would be satisfaction. Or maybe tears. Instead, there was this strange emptiness. Because seeing me hadn't changed them. It had only unsettled them. That night, I barely slept. My phone buzzed twice with messages I didn't open. I already knew who they were from. Melissa. My mother. Maybe both. Morning came quietly. Sunlight crept into the kitchen as I made coffee, replaying every expression from the night before. The pauses. The forced smiles. The discomfort they tried to hide. They weren't proud. They were threatened. By noon, the calls started. First my mother. Alyssa, she said carefully, as if choosing each word could rewrite the past. Your father and I have been talking. I leaned against the counter. About. Well, she sighed, about how you've always been more private. We didn't want to pressure you. I closed my eyes. There it was. The rewriting. You didn't pressure me? I asked softly. No, she insisted. We always wanted you to grow at your own pace. I laughed, not loudly, not cruelly, just enough to let the truth slip out. That's not how I remember it, I said. There was a pause. Well, she continued, her tone sharpening slightly, you can't blame us for being concerned. Melissa always showed ambition. You were different. Different. The word they used when they didn't want to say lesser. I was quiet, I said. That doesn't mean I lacked ambition. She huffed. We just didn't know what you were doing. You never told us. I straightened. Because every time I did, you laughed. Silence. I could almost hear her flipping through memories, trying to find one that supported her version. We joked, she said finally. Families tease. No, I replied. Family support. You compared. You dismissed. You decided who was worth praising. She didn't deny it. Instead, she changed tactics. Well, she said lightly, now that you're doing well, maybe we can move forward. No need to hold on to resentment. Move forward. Without acknowledgement. Without apology. I'm not holding resentment, I said. I'm holding boundaries. She didn't like that. You're being dramatic, she snapped. Your father is hurt. He feels blindsided. I smiled bitterly. Funny. That's how I felt my entire childhood. She hung up shortly after that. The next call was Melissa. She didn't waste time. What was that? She demanded. What was what? I asked. Last night, she said sharply. You could have warned me. You embarrassed me. I sat down at the table. I didn't embarrass you. You embarrassed yourself by assuming I was still behind you. She scoffed. Don't act like this wasn't intentional. I took a deep breath. Melissa, I didn't buy my house to impress you. I bought it because I wanted a life you never thought I deserved. That struck a nerve. You think we didn't want you to succeed? She shot back. You didn't want me to succeed more than you. I replied calmly. Silence. Then, softer, more dangerous. You always make yourself the victim. I felt something settle inside me. A clarity I hadn't felt before. I was the victim, I said. But I'm not anymore. She hung up. That afternoon, my father showed up unannounced. I saw his car from the window and felt my stomach tighten, not with fear, but with anticipation. This was coming. I opened the door before he knocked. He stepped inside without asking. I raised you better than this, he said immediately. I closed the door slowly. Better than what? Then showing us up, he snapped. Then letting people think we didn't support you. I folded my arms. They don't think it. They saw it. His jaw tightened. You always twist things. No, I said evenly. I stopped twisting myself to fit your narrative. He paced the living room, agitation radiating off him. You could have told us. We could have helped. I laughed softly. Helped how? By telling me to be more like Melissa? He stopped pacing. She worked harder. I met his eyes. So did I. You just didn't value the work that didn't look like hers. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Because he knew it was true. You've changed, he muttered. Yes, I said. I grew. He shook his head. You've become cold. No, I corrected. I've become honest. That was the moment something broke. He sighed heavily and sank into a chair. What do you want from us? I considered the question carefully. Nothing, I said. That's the point. I don't need your approval anymore. He looked up sharply. Then why invite us? I met his gaze. Because I needed you to stop underestimating me, even if it was only for one night. He said nothing. When he left, he didn't apologize. But he didn't accuse me again either. Over the next few days, the family chatter changed. Cousins messaged differently. Aunts asked real questions. Uncles stopped making jokes. And my parents? They went quiet. No calls. No texts. That silence used to terrify me. Now, it felt like peace. Until the message came. From my mother. We need to talk. Properly. About the house. About everything. I stared at the screen. Because I knew what that meant. They weren't done. They were adjusting. And adjustment often came with expectations. Or demands. And whatever they wanted next, I wasn't sure they were ready for my answer. The meeting happened 3 days later. My mother insisted on coming to the house again. She said it would be easier if we talked somewhere familiar. I knew what that really meant. They wanted to be surrounded by proof. My father arrived first this time, unusually quiet, his eyes scanning the exterior like he was trying to calculate something invisible. My mother followed shortly after, carrying a box of pastries she didn't ask if I wanted. A peace offering. Or leverage. They sat at the kitchen table, my table, and waited for me to pour the coffee. I didn't. So, my mother said eventually, forcing a pleasant tone, "We've been thinking." That sentence had always made my shoulders tense, even when I was a child. "I'm listening," I said, sitting across from them. She glanced at my father, then back at me. "This house, it must have cost a lot." There it was. "I paid for it," I replied. "Yes, of course," she said quickly, waving her hand. "We know that. We're just surprised. We didn't realize you were doing this well." I smiled faintly. "Neither did you ask." My father cleared his throat. "Your mother and I are nearing retirement." I nodded. "Okay. And things aren't as comfortable as we expected them to be," he continued. I waited. My mother leaned forward. "Families help each other, Alyssa." I set my mug down slowly. "What kind of help are you asking for?" She hesitated, not because she didn't know, but because she wanted to phrase it in a way that didn't sound like what it was. "Well," she said, "maybe not now, but eventually this house is large. Bigger than you need." Ah, there it was. "You're suggesting what exactly?" I asked calmly. She smiled a little too sweet. "We thought maybe, in the future, we could all live together. You know, keep the family close." My chest tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "You want to move in?" My father raised his hands. "Not like that. Just temporarily. Until we figure things out." I studied them. The people who told me I would never own a home. The people who laughed when I rented a studio apartment. The people who used to say, "Don't aim too high, Alyssa." Now, they wanted my roof. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. My mother's smile faltered. "Why not?" "Because you never protected me. Because you only see value when it benefits you. Because peace took me years to build." But I said, "Because I like my life the way it is." Her eyes hardened. "So you'd let your parents struggle while you live in luxury?" Luxury. I looked around at my neutral walls, modest furniture, quiet space. "This isn't luxury," I said. "It's stability. Something I built without you." My father frowned. "We sacrificed for you." "No," I corrected. "You provided. You didn't sacrifice for me. You sacrificed for the family image." My mother's voice sharpened. "That's unfair." "Is it?" I asked. "When Melissa needed help, you paid her rent. When I struggled, you told me to work harder." They didn't deny it. Instead, my mother changed direction again. "Well," she said softly, "we just assumed, after everything, you'd want to give back." I leaned back in my chair. "Give back to what?" "To us," she said. I nodded slowly. "You want a return on an investment you never made." My father stood up abruptly. "You're being cruel." I met his gaze. "No. I'm being honest." He pointed around the room. "All of this, it didn't come from nowhere." "You're right," I said. It came from nights you didn't see, from jobs you didn't ask about, from discipline you mocked. Silence filled the kitchen. Then my mother sighed dramatically. You've always held grudges. I smiled. You call them grudges. I call them lessons. She crossed her arms.
So, that's it?
You've got yours, and now we're on our own. I stood up. This house is not a bargaining chip, I said. It's not a family reward. It's not compensation for years of comparison. My father's voice softened. Alyssa, we're still your parents. I nodded. And I'm still your daughter. But I'm not your solution. They left soon after that. This time, without pastries. That evening, Melissa called. Her voice was tense. Did they ask you to? I paused. Ask me what?
To help them, she said.
Financially. I almost laughed. So, they went to you first, I said. Yes, she snapped. And when I said no, they mentioned you. Of course they did. I said no too, I replied. There was a long pause. You, she said. Really? Yes, I said. Really? Her tone shifted, defensive, almost wounded. There are parents. And I'm their daughter, I said. The one they never believed in. She sighed. You've changed. I smiled softly. So have you. You just haven't noticed. She didn't argue. The next few weeks were quiet again. No visits. No calls. But something had shifted. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't bracing for disappointment. I was living. I hosted friends. I planted herbs in the backyard. I learned to enjoy silence without filling it with self-doubt. Then a letter arrived. Handwritten. From my mother. We didn't realize how much we hurt you. We want to talk again. This time, without expectations. I stared at the envelope for a long time. Because now I understood something clearly. They weren't changing because they loved me. They were changing because they had lost access. And I wasn't sure whether reopening that door would bring healing, or just a new version of the same pain. I didn't reply to my mother's letter right away. I left it on the kitchen counter for 3 days, walking past it every morning like it was something fragile. Something that might break open if I touched it too soon. We didn't realize how much we hurt you. That sentence replayed in my head over and over. Because it wasn't true. They realized. They just didn't care until now. On the 4th night, I finally picked it up again and reread it slowly. No apologies. No specifics. Just regret wrapped in softness. The kind of letter written when people feel consequences, not guilt. Still, a part of me wanted to believe them. That same part of me that used to wait by the window as a kid, hoping they'd notice how hard I was trying. So, I agreed to meet them. Neutral ground this time. A small cafe halfway between my house and theirs. When I walked in, they were already seated. My mother stood immediately, arms slightly open like she wanted a hug, but wasn't sure she deserved one. I didn't hug her. I sat down. My father looked older than I remembered. Smaller somehow. His shoulders slumped, hands folded together like he was bracing for something heavy. Thank you for coming, my mother said softly. I came to listen, I replied. Not to be persuaded. She nodded quickly. Of course. There was a long pause. Finally, my father spoke. We didn't handle things well. With you. That was new. How? I asked. He swallowed. We compared you to Melissa. Constantly. Yes, I said. You did. My mother winced. We thought competition would motivate you. It taught me I was invisible, I said. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't rush to comfort her. I had learned not to interrupt people when they were finally sitting with the truth. We didn't mean to make you feel less than, she whispered. But you did, I replied. For years. She nodded. We see that now. I leaned forward. Why now? Silence. Then my father said something that shifted the air between us. Because we thought you'd fail. I froze. I'm sorry, I said. He sighed deeply. When you moved out, when you stopped asking for help, we assumed life would humble you. My mother stared into her coffee. We thought you'd come back. My chest tightened. So when I struggled, I said slowly. You weren't worried. You were waiting. They didn't deny it. That's why you never offered help. I continued. You wanted to be right. My mother's voice cracked. We didn't realize how strong you were. I almost laughed. That's because you never looked, I said. Another pause. Then my father reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. We need to tell you something, he said. My stomach dropped. He slid the paper across the table. It was a copy of a trust document.
My name wasn't on it.
Melissa's was. What is this? I asked, already knowing. My mother finally looked up. When your grandparents passed, they left something for the family. And you gave it all to Melissa? I said quietly. She needed it more. My mother replied automatically. I looked at her. Did she? My father spoke before she could answer. We always assumed you'd manage on your own. There it was. The sentence that explained my entire childhood. They punished me for being capable. You didn't exclude me by accident, I said. You chose her. My mother reached for my hand. I pulled it back. You built a story about me, I continued. Strong, independent, unbreakable. And then you used that story to justify neglect. Tears rolled down her face. We didn't think it would hurt you this deeply. I stood up. This conversation doesn't end with forgiveness, I said calmly. It ends with understanding. My father nodded slowly. What do you want? I thought about that question for a long time. I want honesty, I said. No more pretending. No more rewriting history. My mother nodded. We can do that. And I want boundaries, I added. You don't get access to my life because I succeeded. My father's voice was barely above a whisper. Do you still want us in it? I looked at them, really looked. Two people who loved control more than connection. Who mistook favoritism for parenting. Who were only learning accountability because they'd lost leverage. I don't know yet, I said honestly. And I won't be rushed into deciding.
They accepted that.
At least outwardly. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt lighter than I expected. Not because things were fixed, but because I finally understood. It was never about money. It was never about houses. It was never about success. It was about who they believed deserved love. And now, for the first time, I believed I did. I didn't plan to confront Melissa. That's the truth. I wasn't sitting around thinking of speeches or imagining dramatic arguments. I had already spent too many years rehearsing conversations that never went the way I hoped. I was done chasing closure. But life has a way of forcing moments when you least expect them. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. I was at the house, sorting through boxes in the guest room, things I'd never unpacked because I was too busy surviving when I first moved in. Old notebooks, files, childhood photos I'd taken when I left my parents' house, not knowing if I'd ever want to see them again. That's when my phone rang. Melissa. I almost didn't answer. But something told me this call mattered. Hey, she said, her voice tight. Are you home? Yes, I replied cautiously.
Why?
I'm nearby, she said. I thought maybe we could talk. In person. I hesitated.
About what?
There was a pause. About everything. I should have said no. But part of me wanted to see her, really see her, without our parents between us for once.
Fine, I said.
Come by. She arrived 20 minutes later, pulling into my driveway like she'd done it 100 times before. I watched from the window as she stepped out of her car, glanced at the house, and adjusted her jacket. She was nervous. That was new. When I opened the door, she smiled awkwardly. Hi. Hi, I said, stepping aside to let her in. She walked slowly through the living room, looking around like someone seeing a place for the first time, because she'd been so busy assuming she knew my life that she'd never bothered to look. It's really nice, she said. Thank you, I replied. We sat across from each other, the same way our parents had days earlier. I noticed how she kept folding and unfolding her hands, how her eyes darted around when things got quiet. So, she said finally, Mom and Dad told me you met with them. Yes, I said. She nodded. They said things were intense. They were honest, I corrected. She swallowed. They also mentioned the trust. There it was. I leaned back. And she exhaled sharply. I didn't know. I studied her face carefully. Didn't know what? That they excluded you, she said quickly. That it was intentional. I didn't answer right away. Because here's the thing. Ignorance can be accidental, or it can be convenient. And the rent they paid for you? I asked calmly. The credit card bills? The car? Her face flushed. I thought. You thought it was normal, I finished. She looked down. I thought they helped both of us. I almost laughed. When was the last time they paid one of my bills? I asked. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I didn't realize, she said quietly. That phrase is doing a lot of work today, I replied. She straightened. Look, I know you think I had it easy. I don't think it, I said. I lived it. Her eyes flicked up, defensive. You always acted like you didn't need help. Because when I asked, I was told no, I said. So, I stopped asking. She was silent. I didn't compete with you. I continued. I survived around you. She rubbed her forehead. They put us against each other. They chose you. I corrected. You just didn't object. That landed. She flinched. I didn't know how, she whispered. That's fair, I said. But now you do. She looked at me then, really looked at me, not as the strong one, not as the poor one, not as the sibling who would always figure it out, just as a person. What do you want from me? She asked. I thought about that. I want you to stop pretending we had the same parents, I said. I want you to stop defending things that didn't happen to you. And I want you to stop expecting me to fix what they broke. She nodded slowly. I can do that, she said. I believed her. But belief didn't mean access. There's something else, I added. She stiffened. Okay. I won't be the fallback, I said. If they come to you asking for help, that's between you and them. If they come to me, I'll decide, without pressure. She frowned. You're cutting them off? No, I said calmly. I'm cutting off entitlement. She sighed. They're scared. They should be, I replied. They built a future assuming my failure. She didn't argue. That's when she said something I didn't expect. They're talking about selling the house, she said quietly. My parents' house. I felt a strange mix of emotions, sadness, irony, relief. And I asked. They thought maybe you'd want it, she said. I laughed, actually laughed for the first time in days. No, I said. That house was never home. She smiled faintly. Figures. We sat in silence for a while. Then she stood. I'm proud of you, she said. I looked up. For what? For not becoming bitter, she said. For building this without breaking. I nodded. I broke. I just rebuilt myself quietly. At the door, she paused. We're not enemies, are we? I considered the question carefully. No, I said. But we're not pretending anymore either. After she left, I walked through the house slowly. Every room, every wall, every corner. This space wasn't proof. It was freedom. And for the first time, I realized something powerful. Revenge doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like removal. Removing access. Removing assumptions. Removing yourself from narratives that never served you. And the people who once laughed at your limitations? They noticed the silence first. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It never does. It came in fragments. Phone calls not returned. Invitations that stopped arriving. Neighbors asking questions my parents couldn't answer without tripping over their own stories. I heard about it through Melissa at first. They're struggling, she said one evening, her voice low. Not just financially. Socially. I didn't respond right away. Because for the first time in my life, their struggle wasn't my emergency. They sold the house, she continued. Faster than they expected. I pictured it, the place they always treated like proof of success. The living room where comparisons were made. The kitchen table where decisions were finalized without me. And, I asked. They moved into a rental, she said. Smaller. Temporary. Temporary had always been my word. People are asking questions, she added. At church. At family gatherings. That got my attention. What kind of questions? I asked. She hesitated. Why they needed to sell so suddenly. Why they didn't move in with you. I smiled faintly. Because silence has a way of speaking loudly. They don't know what to say, she admitted. They can't explain it without admitting things they don't want to admit. Good, I thought. For years, they controlled the narrative. I was the independent one. The low-maintenance one. The daughter who didn't need much. Now that story was cracking. Not because I exposed it, but because I stepped out of it. A week later, my mother called. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Hello, I said. Her voice sounded thinner. Alyssa, hi. Hi, I replied calmly. We were wondering, she began, already careful, if you'd like to come over for dinner. Just us. I looked around my kitchen, sunlight through the windows, quiet music playing, peace humming in the walls. I don't think that's a good idea, I said gently. There was a pause. Why? She asked, almost pleading. Because I don't want to sit at another table where I shrink to make others comfortable. But I said, because I'm not ready. She exhaled shakily. People are talking. I imagine they are, I replied. They're saying things, she continued. Unkind things. I didn't react. Alyssa, she said, her voice breaking. We're being judged. I finally spoke. Welcome to it. She gasped softly. That's cruel, she whispered. No, I said. It's honest. Silence stretched between us. Then she said the thing I'd been waiting for my entire life. The thing I never thought I'd hear. We failed you. I closed my eyes. Not because it hurt, but because it landed. We failed to protect you, she continued. We failed to see you. I didn't rush to respond. Apologies mean nothing if they're spoken to relieve guilt instead of repair damage. I believe you, I said finally. She sobbed quietly. But belief doesn't erase impact, I added. And acknowledgement doesn't grant access. I don't expect access, she said quickly. I don't want to lose you. I opened my eyes. You already did, I said softly. Years ago. Another pause. Then, quietly, is there any way back? I thought about that question longer than she probably expected. There's a way forward, I said. But it doesn't look like the past. She nodded, though she couldn't see me. What does it look like? She asked. It looks like boundaries, I said. It looks like accountability without defensiveness. It looks like not asking me to fix what you broke. She agreed, again. But agreement wasn't proof. Weeks passed. My parents stopped calling every few days. They stopped hinting. They stopped asking. Instead, they started doing something unfamiliar. They listened. They showed up to family events quietly. They didn't dominate conversations. They didn't explain themselves. And people noticed. The whisper softened, not because they were forgiven, but because the performance had ended. One afternoon, I received an envelope. Inside was a copy of the trust document. Revised. My name was added. Along with a note. We can't change the past, but we can stop repeating it. I stared at the paper for a long time. Then I folded it neatly and set it aside. Not because I didn't deserve it, but because for the first time I didn't need it to validate me. Melissa called that night. They finally did the right thing, she said. Yes, I replied. They did. Does it change anything? She asked. I smiled. It changes them, not me. She laughed softly. You're different. No, I said. I'm whole. That night, I walked through my house again. But this time it felt different. Not defiant. Not victorious. Just grounded. Revenge hadn't come from humiliation. It hadn't come from confrontation. It came from refusing to rescue people from consequences they earned. And that kind of revenge? It lasts. The weeks after the trust revision were strangely quiet. Not peaceful, quiet. The kind of quiet that hums in your ears because everyone is holding their breath, waiting for the next move. I had expected a battle. Something loud, something explosive. But it didn't come. Instead, It came in small moments, subtle, almost invisible, and yet it cut deeper than any argument ever could. My parents started showing up to family events, but differently this time. Not with their usual loud laughter, their constant comparison. Their side glances meant to measure me against Melissa.
No.
This time, they moved quietly. They spoke softly. They asked questions about things I actually cared about. They waited for answers instead of assuming them. I watched them struggle. Because suddenly, the control they'd taken for granted was gone. The power they had always assumed over me, over my life, my choices, my successes, had slipped through their fingers. And there was nothing they could do to get it back. Melissa came to visit one afternoon. She leaned against a kitchen counter, arms crossed, watching me move from room to room as I prepared lunch. "You're calm," she said. I paused, smiling faintly. "I am. Because I finally stopped caring about what they think." She shook her head. "I don't know if I could have done that." "Maybe not," I said. "But you didn't have to. You were always the favored one. I had to survive." Her eyes softened. "You really made them see." "I didn't make them see," I said firmly. "I just stopped rescuing them from their own mistakes." It was a lesson I had learned the hard way. That night, my parents called. "Can we come over?" my mother asked, voice tentative. I paused. My instinct wanted to say no, but there was a part of me that wanted to watch them try. "Fine," I said. "But we'll have one rule. No demands. No lectures. No comparisons. Just conversation." They hesitated, then agreed. When they arrived, I opened the door, keeping my expression neutral. My mother's eyes flicked around the house, taking in the furniture, the decor, the space I had built entirely on my own. My father followed, looking at me as if he were trying to measure how different I had become. We sat in the living room, careful, polite. "Thank you for having us," my father said. "You're welcome," I replied. Silence stretched. My parents were trying, really trying, and yet they couldn't hide the tension in their bodies. Finally, my mother spoke. "We wanted to say we're sorry. Truly." I studied her face. "For what exactly?" "For everything," she said, almost whispering. "For comparing you to Melissa. For not supporting you the way we should have. For expecting you to fail." I nodded slowly. "I accept that. But apologies don't erase the years of impact." She sighed. "We know. We've realized that now." "Good," I said. "Because from now on, I'm setting boundaries. You will not control me with guilt. You will not demand my time or energy. And you will not assume my successes are yours to comment on or judge." They were silent. My father shifted in his chair. "And what about Melissa?" "She understands," I said simply. "She sees the truth now. And she's accepted her place without expecting anything from me." I leaned back, letting my words hang in the room. This was the quiet revenge that didn't require confrontation or shouting. It was the slow, unshakable shift of power, the realization that I was no longer under their authority or influence. My parents left that evening. They hugged me, quietly, almost awkwardly, and for the first time, it felt like a goodbye to the old dynamics rather than a plea for forgiveness. When the door closed behind them, I exhaled. The weight I didn't even realize I had been carrying was gone. I walked through my house, looking at the spaces I had created, each one a testament to independence, resilience, and self-worth. I finally understood something deeply. Revenge isn't about hurting others. It isn't about proving a point or winning a battle. It's about reclaiming your life. It's about removing yourself from narratives that don't serve you and building a reality where you thrive on your own terms. And as I poured myself a glass of wine and looked out at the backyard I had planted with my own hands, I smiled. Because I had done it. Quietly, confidently, and irrevocably. The family that mocked me, underestimated me, and tried to control me had faced the consequences of their choices. Not through dramatic confrontation, but through the undeniable proof of my independence and the silent withdrawal of my energy from their manipulation. And that, I realized, was the most satisfying revenge of all. The morning after my parents left, the house felt different. Not just quiet, Not just still, but lighter, like I had been holding my breath for decades without realizing it. Every corner, every wall, every room carried a memory, some warm, some bitter. And yet now, the weight that had pressed down on me for years had finally lifted. I walked through the living room, running my fingers over the edge of the coffee table, thinking about how many evenings I had sat here, shrinking under the invisible shadow of comparison. The shadow of Melissa. The shadow of my parents' judgment. The shadow of a life I was told I would never fully deserve. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the garden I had nurtured. The sunlight fell across the table, warm and golden, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pure, unshakable calm. It wasn't relief. It wasn't triumph. It was completion. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Melissa. "I'm proud of you. You finally made them see what they never noticed before." I smiled faintly. Her words were comforting, but they didn't validate me. I didn't need validation. Not from her, not from them, not from anyone. For years, I had carried the weight of proving myself, proving that I was worthy, proving that my quiet ambition was just as valid as Melissa's boisterous successes, proving that I deserved space, respect, and acknowledgement, things they thought they could control. And now I realized I didn't need to prove anything. The phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. I hesitated before answering. "Alyssa," she said softly, her voice cautious. We just wanted to check in." I took a deep breath. Their voice had that tentative edge, the one that always came when they were testing limits. But I felt calm, steady, untouchable. "I'm doing well," I replied, keeping my tone even. "I've built the life I wanted. I don't need anyone else's approval." There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, like she was weighing every word, realizing I wasn't the child they could push around anymore. "Good," she whispered finally. "We're proud." I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to. Their pride, after all, had been conditional for years. Now it didn't matter. I hung up, placed my phone on the counter, and walked to the window. The garden outside was lush, full of life I had nurtured with my own hands. Each plant, each flower, a testament to patience, dedication, and resilience. The realization hit me hard. This garden, this house, this life was entirely mine.
Built by me. Protected by me.
Earned by me. I thought about the past, the ridicule, the comparisons, the subtle gaslighting. The moments when they would measure me against Melissa and dismiss my efforts. The times they withheld praise because it didn't fit their image of who I should be. The countless instances where I learned to hide my victories, hide my ambitions, hide myself, just to survive. And yet, despite all that, I had thrived. Not because they recognized it, but because I refused to let their judgment define me. Later that evening, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find Melissa standing there, a tentative smile on her face. "I just wanted to see you," she said softly. "Come in," I replied. We sat in the living room, silence stretching comfortably between us. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't tense. It was real. "You've changed," she said finally, breaking the quiet. "I had to," I replied. I couldn't stay trapped in their expectations anymore. She nodded slowly. "I didn't realize how hard it was for you."
I didn't see it.
"I thought you had it easy." "You didn't see it," I said calmly, "because it wasn't about ease. It was about survival. And I survived despite them, not because of them." She studied me for a long moment. "You've taken control." "Yes," I said, "and I'm not giving it back." Her eyes softened. "They'll finally understand, won't they? They'll feel the consequences," I said, sipping my tea. "And maybe that's the only lesson they'll ever fully learn." Melissa smiled faintly. "You're different now. Stronger." "No," I said. "I'm whole." The next morning, my parents called again. I debated answering, but eventually did. "Alyssa," my mother began, voice careful, "we just wanted to see how you were." "I'm well," I said firmly. I've built my life, my space, my home. It's full and it's mine. There was a pause. We're trying to understand, my father said softly. I hope you are, I replied. Because understanding doesn't mean access. It doesn't mean control. It doesn't mean rewriting history. Do you want us in your life? My mother asked hesitantly. I considered that for a long moment. Not in the old ways, I said. Not as authority figures, not as judges. I will decide how our relationship exists, and it will not exist on your terms anymore. Another silence. I see, my father whispered. You understand now, I said. And that's enough. Hanging up, I felt a surge of quiet victory. Not vindictive. Not cruel. Just final. I walked through my house, touching surfaces, looking at the spaces I had created. Each wall, each chair, each piece of furniture told a story, my story. One I hadn't had to explain. One no one could undermine. For the first time, I realized the depth of my own strength. Revenge had never been about shaming them. It wasn't about public humiliation or confrontation. It wasn't about proving them wrong. Revenge had been about living fully, unapologetically, and on my own terms. It was about walking through life knowing that their opinion no longer had power over me. Knowing that my achievements weren't defined by comparisons. Knowing that my worth was inherent, not conditional. That night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of winter approaching. And I realized something profound. For years, I had been waiting for them to recognize me, to validate me, to love me unconditionally. And now I understood. I didn't need them to. I had built a life they couldn't touch, a life they couldn't undermine. A life that belonged entirely to me. And that, I realized, was the most satisfying form of revenge. Because it wasn't temporary. It wasn't loud. It wasn't reactive. It was permanent. If you connected with Alyssa's journey, her courage, her patience, and her unwavering strength, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. I share daily stories of people reclaiming their lives, standing up to those who doubted them, and showing that sometimes the most powerful revenge is quiet, confident, and unstoppable. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had to reclaim your life from someone who underestimated you? Your story might inspire someone else to take control too.